people like it. 8 out of 10 Republicans, 7 out of 10 independents, and even majorities in the Democratic Party favor protecting a baby whose heartbeat can be heard. Next slide. No matter where you go in the state, if a doctor is able to detect a heartbeat of an unborn baby, that baby should be legally protected. 2/3 of the state want this bill, no matter where you go, no matter who you ask. Next slide. And so we launched this bill back in February 2011. We drafted it. God gave me the idea. I was actually standing at a funeral, and had just lost my father, and just stood at a wake of Mark Lally, who was my former boss. He was the former president of Ohio Right to Life. And I just looked at him and I said, you know, he spent his whole life working to end abortion, and he never got to see what he worked for. And something just hit me that we've got to do this, and we've got to do it now, because life is short. And I tell people at funerals that don't mourn too much, because Jesus is coming back in about 20 minutes, so you don't have really long at all. Even if that's not the case, our lives are not that long. And so, if we're going to do what we're here on this earth to do, then my strong suggestion to you is, whatever it is that God put on your heart to do it now. Do it now. And that's the sense I had as I stood there at that funeral. Do it now. And I said to a friend, I said, you know, what do you think if we can't carry them all out? What if we protect them from heartbeat? They said, yeah, I like that. So we drafted the bill. We introduced the bill here with legislators across the top. Those are the red heart balloons. There were 5,000 red heart balloons we delivered to the State House. There's Ron Magg, second from the left. He said to me, he had my favorite quote from the press conference. Someone said, what about the courts? What the courts will do? And he said, there's only one judge that I care about. He's not on the court, the Supreme Court. Yeah. Next slide. And so they get a little better idea of the balloons. They surrounded the room. Next slide. When you deliver them in the snow, yeah, they get all tangled up. It's really not fun at all. But we delivered them, and we filled up the elevators. I mean, you couldn't shut the doors hardly. There were so many balloons in so many offices of the State House. This is one of my favorite pictures, is because we brought in I think it was March of 2011, we brought in the youngest to ever testify in the Ohio legislature. Her name was Haley, and she was 9 weeks old in the womb. And so the legislature got to hear baby Haley's heartbeat and see it on the screen and hear it through the ultrasound. And so we found out that just that one thing, just that one testimony from that unborn child who couldn't even speak yet, saved a life. A woman came up to me and said, hey Jan, I want you to know that there's a friend of mine. She asked me to drive her to the abortion clinic. I told her I couldn't do it because I read the publicity, the newspaper articles. I saw the publicity that came about as a result of this testimony. And when I knew there was a beating heart like that, I had to tell her no. And a couple of weeks later, and she was distraught and downtrodden because this woman said, I'm going to keep the appointment. I'm going to have the abortion. And because this woman said no, and she got to apparently the clinic, she changed her mind, and they showed me a picture on her phone, on Facebook, of baby Aiden, a little boy, who is now 3 years old, because this bill was introduced and this testimony went forth. Now then in the Senate, we wanted to do the same thing, show the people on the Senate side. But the Senate said, we're not going to let you do your little antics. You're not bringing in an ultrasound, not here. No, not in this chamber. No. And so I'm learning that when something happens like that, that you need to give thanks in all things. So the Ducia Ham from the Ashland Care Center called me up. She goes, yeah, it's not looking too good because they don't want us to do that. I said, that's all right. Let's just give thanks. God's going to work it for good. So what happened? I said, ask them about videos. They still allow videos, right? And so what we did is we played the video of this testimony from the House. And at just the right moment, she said the words, standing in front of the Senate chambers and the committee there, she said, not the chambers, but the committee, she said, the House heard her heart. Next slide. The Senate sees her face. And that's when Senator Cliff Hype walked into the room holding baby Haley, who was now 9 weeks old, born. She was 9 weeks old, was unborn in the House, and at 9 weeks she was born, and the Senate saw her face. That was the picture in the front of the Metro section of most every newspaper in the state. Next slide. But they still wouldn't do it. Despite the fact that we had rallies outside the State House. Next slide. We had rallies inside the State House. That's me holding up the list of supporters. It's about, sorry, mind your way, about 5 feet high. And it's everybody under the sun. We held that up and filled up the atrium back in September of 2011. It had passed the House, but we still hadn't gotten it through the Senate. Next slide. There's the slide. We actually had more people in the atrium. People that worked there their whole life said, "I've been working here since the 1970s. I've never seen the atrium with so many people." We had overflow outside where people were watching the rally on monitors. But we filled up every chair the State House owns. And that was the rally where we encouraged the Senate, which is that doorway to the left. That's the Senate offices right there in the atrium of the State House. And we said, pass that bill, pass that bill. They said they would pass it, and they did not keep their word. Next slide. And Dr. Wilkie, very famous, the founder of the pro-life movement, he always was known for playing that heartbeat. It sounds, an early heartbeat is very fast. And there he was playing it, speaking on behalf of the bill at the rally. And we brought in African Americans for Life, and they came and they had a hearing. We had, next slide, we had the post-abortive women came. We had every constituency you can think of, and Pastors for Life, they all came. Then we had kids for the heartbeat bill. Go back one just if you would. What we did is we put these kids in the hearing room. That little boy, Mark Harrington's son, he was 7 years old. And he stood up and he says, "We need the Senate to pass the heartbeat bill right now. And when I say now, I mean right now." The little kid is adorable. So what we did is I had a little test. And I said, "How many people know, who knows what the state of Ohio motto is?" This little kid had to be 12 years old. He says, "Yeah, with God all things are possible." You're chairman of the committee. And I set up these kids in the committee, and they all went around. "My name is Timmy from Toledo, and I say yes to protect babies with beating hearts." And, "Hi, my name is Melissa from Marion, and I say yes to protecting babies with beating hearts." They go through the whole hearing process. The chairman takes his gavel and slaps it down on the counter and says, "It's unanimous. The kids for the heartbeat bill have voted unanimously to protect babies with beating hearts." And then they carried, you can go to the next slide, they had those teddy bears. The teddy bears had, when you push the stomach of the teddy bear, it had a beating heart, an ultrasound of a real live baby. Not a baby bear, but a baby. And they were not really that receptive, you can kind of tell by their face. "What's this? My office filled with kids, what is this?" Next slide. And so, the next Valentine's Day, we weren't allowed to bring balloons in. We've already done that. So what are you going to do the second Valentine's Day? 2012, well, in the Senate, we actually had 2,200 roses. 2,200 roses. That's the amount of lives the heartbeat bill would save in a month. We packaged them in sets of 3 from constituents with a card that says these 3 roses. This is how many babies this bill will save every hour. And we filled up the room. It was absolutely beautiful. You see the next slide, I think it's Jim Beakey standing next to me. And people were coming in to get their pictures taken. It was just the most fragrant, wonderful room. And someone, I think she works for TSA as well as the State House, she came in, "Who said you could do that? You need to remove those right now, right now!" I think her head spun all the way around, I'm not sure. But she said, "You need to move these right now!" And the press conference is happening in about 10 minutes, and I'm like, what in the world? So we had to move all of these roses in 10 minutes to the next location across the State House. And it doesn't look nearly as cool, but I'm still pasting up the heartbeat sign as the Columbus Dispatch and AP are taking pictures of me, and it wasn't very flattering at all. But that's the second Valentine's Day. There was some people who met with resistance. I think it's Shirley Smith, Democrat woman in the Senate, and she called me up and she said, I had never been in her office. I don't waste a lot of time with the Democrats. Why waste my time? I mean, it's bad enough. It seems like a waste of time with the Republicans we have these days. But so she called me up and she said, "I don't want any more balloons or roses or candy or calls. And if you come in my office, I'm going to get a restraining order." And I said, "Okay, I'm happy not to go into your office, but I can't control the people in your district who call you. That's kind of your job, isn't it? To receive calls from those you represent. Can't touch that. Can't do anything about it." She didn't care for me much. Still does it. Next, same with the Republicans these days. All right, so then we rented a plane, and we flew it over the State House. Ohio passed the heartbeat bill. There it is. Next slide. And so then that didn't work, so we went and bought a 3-story high balloon that said, "Pass the heartbeat bill now." Next slide. It went right in front of the State House. But we also had a song commission from Sonic Flood. They sang the heartbeat song. That little girl came and spoke at one of our rallies outside. Little Bella was the product of rape, talking about how lives like hers matter as well. Next slide. You can see we're signing up. Oh, we sent some rhino cards. They didn't care for those much. Next slide. There's a picture of the balloon. A little deflated. We just had to blow that thing back up again. But that's what we did for the first 2 years. Next slide. And we prayed. And we prayed. and we prayed. In fact, September 17th, we just prayed again, Constitution Day. We actually stood on, though, you see the motto? With God all things are possible? We literally stood on the promise of God in front of the State House, that with God all things are possible, as we made an appeal to heaven. Next slide. And so we sent postcards out to